So, yes.
Deep underground in the Batcave come Cilsey and Katiana.
Cilsey and Katiana, the Fantastic Two. What's your superpower?
I got an encyclopedia for a brain.
Um, my superpower is I don't have a job. So I can do anything. Maybe.
So when are we going to the beach?
Hopefully very soon. I mean, not very soon. But hopefully soon. um, I am just double checking our audio real quick, and then we can start for real.
Okay, I'll let you do the summary.
Yeah. It says we're live. Okay. So this week we read the Fantastic Four #1, 1961, written in 1961 or written, illustrated, whatever you call comics. This is the first introduction of the Fantastic Four, and I wanted to start with the cover because there was a couple things on the cover. The Invisible Woman saying she can't turn invisible fast enough. What? What? Okay, whatever. This is my first experience with the Fantastic Four, so that was like, I just felt that was really dumb. Mr. Fantastic looks like he gets taken out by rope. So I don't know how fantastic he is. And then in the top, it said the Comic Authority Code, approved by the Comic Authority Code. So I had to look this up because I was like, what the heck is this? And it's some kind of code that they developed in the 50s that a bunch of publishers came together to get approved for this. And they have like a list of things that can't be in comics. And so some of the ones that really caught my attention were, first of all, there couldn't be any vampires. You can't have vampires.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or like the living dead or zombies. It was super weird. You can also women. Oh, this one got me really good. Women have to have realistic physical qualities. So that's a major change from today's comics versus 1960s comics. Authority figures have to be respected. So judges and cops and mayors and like they can't be disrespected. Criminals cannot be glorified. Criminals or criminal activity cannot be glorified. There can be no gore, and there can be no horror or terror in the titles. The words horror and terror in the titles. So I guess maybe comics got, which I would have to see them. They're probably not terrible by today's standards, but back then I guess they were very horrific. I don't know, that they had to create this comic book authority code thing.
That sounds very 1950-ish. You say it was done in what year? 1950 what?
I think it said like 1956 or 54, something like that.
That was the McCarthy era.
They're trying to keep people wholesome or
yeah, it was
something.
kind of yeah, they were trying to control people a lot, and that was when you had the McCarthy era, and they were going after anyone they thought was like that was when they were blackballing people in Hollywood and blacklisting people who were either communists or socialists or supported the Communist Party kind of thing. So if you had anything that even smelled like communism or, whatever,
yeah,
then they were after you. It was a really weird time.
Yeah,
It was great.
there was a lot more codes listed, but those ones like jumped out at me for being weird and like almost completely opposite of today time in comics.
Right. Well, that period, that's right before we started protesting all of these restrictions. For the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement, and all that took place, and we just kind of blew up the world in the late 60s.
for goodness, or relative goodness.
Yeah, we basically blew open the doors in the 60s and 70s for a lot of things. Yeah, I just kind of like glanced at. I mean, I did see it, but I read it, but then it didn't hit me that hard.
It just looked like one of the TV ratings.
And,
yeah, and the way it seemed like approved by the comic thing, I was like, this is gonna be made up something. Like, this is something Marvel made up and just put on their comics. But I guess a few of the comic book people came together to make this code up.
Right. So, it's the real thing.
yeah. That's exactly what I thought. Like, they're trying to get credit for something that they made up. So yes, I broke this into 3 parts because it kind of broke it into 3 parts in the thing. So we'll go over each part individually.
One of the other interesting things I'm going to bring up too. This was done by Stan Lee and Jack King.
Oh, I totally didn't even write down the author illustrators for this one.
Yeah, it's on the second page.
I guess.
I think it's.
Yeah, that would have been important.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Yep. So we open on a flare has gone off and displays Fantastic Four in the air that everybody in the city sees in a certain radius, I imagine. There's a shadowed figure in a window saying it's the first time and hopefully the last. We cut to Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, with a society friend having tea. She literally just disappears and books it out of the building and knocks the shit out of some people just walking down the sidewalk. Gets in a cab, freaks out the cab driver, but she's like, oh, well, I guess my powers work. That's good. We then cut to Ben Grimm, the Thing, trying to buy clothes for giants, and a customer service, poor customer service dude, saying he didn't have anything that big for him, but he rips off the clothes that he's wearing and breaks the door and wall out, leaving. Once again, scares the shit out of passerbys and cops and gets shot at. He seems scared of bullets. He's like, oh, that, they were scared the first time, but the second time they'll get me, which I don't know if a bullet, whatever. Okay. He rips a hole in the ground next to a manhole, then busts up down the road into a roadway, causing a car crash, and blames the driver for not stopping in time.
Of course.
We then cut to Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, getting a tune-up for his car that he loves, the second most thing in the world. The first thing is him turning into a fireman and melting his car as he flies away. He destroys his own car, which is his second most favorite thing in the world, with his first most favorite thing in the world. And once again, scares the crap out of people, onlookers, and so they scramble pilots to try to take out this flying Human Torch. They shoot a nuke at him. I guess just regular people the whole army has nukes. But he's saved by Mr. Fantastic and his elastic arms, who throws it into the ocean. And at the same time, he runs out of firepower and starts falling, but Mr. Fantastic saves him, like being a blanket catching him. And so yeah,
Right.
yeah. And it ends with so like it seems like this whole part seems like a super emergency that they're rushing, and then they close it out, but like there's time enough to learn about this later, and cut to part 2 summary.
This is how they came to be the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. So so this is the introduction to these 4 people, and I'm gonna be hard. I'm always gonna be hard on superheroes because it's just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, you gotta just totally, to enjoy it, you have to suspend your disbelief.
But I
like a lot.
I think you can write well and still be, because these people are not good. I mean, maybe they're not supposed to be good, but if anybody has ever walked down a sidewalk anywhere with a lot of people on it, you're invisible whether you're invisible or not. Like, nobody notices you're ever there walking down a sidewalk. So like, her being invisible doesn't have anything to do with it. She could walk around people instead of shoving them out of her way and scaring the crap out of them. Also scaring the crap out of her friend, just disappearing instead of being like, hey, I gotta run, and like exit the building, then turn invisible. So she scares the crap out of her friend. She physically assaults people that are just walking down the sidewalk. And then almost gives a cab driver a heart attack. But does she care about that? No, she just cares like, oh, I guess my powers are working since I almost gave this cab driver a heart attack. Okay. And then we're introduced to Ben Grimm the Thing, who obviously got inside this building without destroying anything. But when he chooses to leave, he knocks out an entire wall with the door frame. And I'll give you an example. They could easily show his strength and size by, as he's rushing out, he like accidentally hits the doorway and like scrapes and, you know, maybe like breaks a little bit off, versus like taking out an entire wall of a store. Like, this customer service dude showed up to work and now he's got a hole in his building. Like, that's a bad day. And he didn't need to do that. We know he could have got out the door by himself. Not to mention ripping 2 holes in roadways and causing a car accident in which he blames the driver for not reacting to a giant monster bursting out of the ground and not stopping soon enough. Like, he's not a good person. This is important later on, too. And then Johnny Storm, who's probably the best superhero so far, because the only thing he destroyed was his own vehicle. So, I mean, okay, yeah. I don't know why you would destroy the second thing that you love most in all the world. But, okay. And he gets, you know, he's not really doing anything super dangerous except flying through the air and scaring people. So, you know, I give, so far in my mind, Johnny Storm has the highest marks for actually being a superhero, for actually being nice.
Yeah, well, he was trying not to burn their planes up, so.
Yeah, so he's really the only one with like a conscience or a moral code or something like that.
Well, Invisible Girl, she does pay the cab driver. Freaks him out, but she paid him.
She tried to pay him, but because she tried to pay him invisibly, he just left without the money.
Oh, right.
So he didn't get paid for that. But technically, he wasn't driving her anywhere. He was driving around town or something, and she's like, let me out here. So I won't mark that against her, except for scaring the crap out of him. And then the stretchy man, I'm going to say he's not good, because like, he shot this thing off that obviously he told everyone, this is super emergency if this happens, and you need to get here ASAP. And I don't think it was an ASAP emergency in which, like, you couldn't have come to the situation through normal means without terrifying an entire town. Which we'll see later on. So, any thoughts on the first section for you?
It may be that the summons caused the changes in the characters so that they didn't have any control over when they became. That's how I interpret it. How I interpreted it. So she saw the Fantastic Four, and she became invisible. That somehow seeing that Fantastic Four in the sky uh, caused her and become caused her to change, become invisible. And I got the same feeling with the two other dudes too. They see the Fantastic Four, and then they changed. They changed into the Thing, and then they change into the Torch because he sees the number 4. And don't worry, because you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
no,
it
I
seems
do.
to be
I do.
like that the signal is the cause of them changing, so they didn't have any control. Like he couldn't get out of his car before he changed.
I can see that. Um and so then I would place all of the blame onto Mr. Fantastic for causing this. Although I don't think the Thing can change. I think he's stuck that way.
He might be. I don't know.
But it might like enrage him or something. That would totally let Johnny Storm off the hook. So at this point, Johnny Storm is the best of all of them, I think. Just because he didn't destroy anything purposely or hurt anybody or destroy public property. He destroyed his own property. But once again, that might not be his. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I guess.
Anyway, that's what I interpreted.
Okay.
They saw the number in the sky, and they changed uncontrollably. And it's possible. I seem to remember that there was a cartoon version of the Fantastic Four that I watched on television back in the 70s, maybe, possibly. So that may be why I think that's what's going on. Maybe a vague memory from when I was a kid.
Yeah, I'll give that to you. That might be what's going on. They don't explain it, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
So that was my thought on that. There were a couple things that got on this first. Where do they say this? Some things that popped out at me that you don't hear very often. I don't remember where it was that I heard them.
Maybe it was later on.
Yeah, it's probably later on.
Okay. So
oh yeah, like the nuclear warhead, the thing with that's pretty ridiculous anyway, because and throw it out in the ocean and it's just going to explode harmlessly. Like no. Yeah, you needed to get it away, but it wasn't going to explode harmlessly in the ocean. It's going to cause a whole big mess out there with the radiation and stuff. So
agreed. I feel like that was a overreaction from the military.
It's possible. I mean, we had nuclear warheads in 1961 because we developed that technology in World War II, and we built a lot of them in the 50s. So, so we had that technology, but I don't know if the public knew how bad the fallout from an atomic bomb was.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, it was probably a newfangled technology, and
there wasn't really. Probably wasn't. They probably were not. The writers were probably not aware of how much.
Oh yeah.
Damage a nuclear weapon was going to cause. Otherwise, they wouldn't have used it.
Agreed. And I think so. I feel like this first section already breaks one of those community or comic book codes, because the Thing is pretty much performing criminal activity. He's destroying public property. He's causing accidents. So I feel like it's I don't know if it's glorifying it, but I mean, I feel like he's doing criminal things. Like if the supervillain was doing this, he would be in trouble.
Well, yeah. Um,
I don't know, just something to think about.
yeah. I'm thinking at the time, though, that he wasn't like a little bit of vandalism, and it was not even vandalism because he's like he doesn't intend to wreck the car. He just comes up in front of it, and it was kind of accidental.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's an interesting point, though.
Yeah. So part 2 goes into how the Fantastic Four came to be. So it's this group of friends / relatives. Johnny Storm is Susan Storm's brother, and Dr. Reed is Susan Storm's fiance / boyfriend-ish. And Ben, I don't know if he has any connection or if they say any connection. They're discussing the space race, and Susan brings up that the commies are going to beat them, which you mentioned.
Yep.
And that Ben is a coward because he's scared of cosmic rays, that they don't know what would happen if they go into space, which makes him angry. So that's good enough reason to break into the launch pad and steal his own ship without any authority whatsoever. They get launched into space and see cosmic rays but can't feel them. And Ben, who's flying the ship, can't do it anymore once his arms start to feel too heavy. And Johnny feels hot, so the autopilot takes over and crash/lands. And once they're all out, Susan starts to turn invisible, but then pops back to visibility. Ben gets angry as Reed comforts Susan, jealous much? And turns into the Thing and shares his unrequited love of Susan. Reed stretches out and so he goes after Reed to like punch. I think he said like paste off his face or something. It was like a weird thing that he said. Reed stretches out and super hugs him with spaghetti arms to stop him. Johnny realizes as he gets excited, his body begins to blaze and he can fly as he is lighter than air. So he's not the Human Torch we read about last time, but kind of the same exact powers.
Similar. Yeah. He used it before, so.
Yep. Reed says that they have more power than anyone alive. Ben asks if that means they have to use their power to help mankind. Reed says yes. They all decide then and there their superhero names. And so the Fantastic Four was born. Dr. Reed, a.k.a. Mr. Fantastic, seems a little full of himself, considering he self-named himself Mr. Fantastic.
You're fantastic.
Like your power's like Stretch Armstrong, and you name yourself, I'm Mr. Fantastic, and I'm going to name all 4 of us after myself. So that's the end of part 2. That's how they all get their powers. Okay. So in the last one we read, I didn't really give them credit for moving the story along quickly, which comic books have to do. Like, they're like shots of things happening.
Right.
So I won't judge them anymore how quickly it moves along, like how quickly they all accept that they have superpowers, how they don't, have any breakdowns.
Yeah, if you're looking for emotional journey, you're not going to get it in a comic book.
Yeah.
They kind of just don't have him.
So yeah, I won't judge them on that. And the cosmic rays are obviously made up-ish superpower thingies, so I'll accept that.
Well, this is interesting because at the time this was written, we had not yet made an orbital flight around the Earth. So we had not yet been in space, and we did not know at that point in time what the effect of because it was during the Mercury project, which is where we sent 7 astronauts by themselves. And I don't know if how much history of the space program you know, but the original 7, the Mercury 7 astronauts, Alan Shepard was the first to go up into space, first American up into space. And John Glenn was the first to make an orbital flight. So he was the first one to go all the way around the Earth in a spaceship. And he did that in 1962, which is after this was made. And they didn't know what the effect that going up into space was going to have on the human body. So this is all
It's like sci-fi fantasy. It's like imagining what's going to
what
happen
what would
because
happen if you went up there, then that you would be getting these superpowers or whatever. So it's kind of plot. If you understand that we didn't know what was going to happen to men or humans when they go up in space, and you know what the long-term effects were going to be, or if they were going to have any kind of effects. And when the astronauts came back, they were put into quarantine for a couple weeks before they and tested and run through all these tests and stuff before they were allowed to, you know, meet their families. So this was especially true when they went, the Apollo astronauts, when they went to the moon. And they came back and they splashed down and they immediately went into quarantine on the Navy ship that picked them up. And they stayed in quarantine for, I think, 2 weeks and had a bunch of tests run because we didn't know if there was anything on the moon that was going to hurt them. So it was a big question mark unknown. Now we know, of course, what's up there and what the dangers are. But at that point in time, they didn't know.
better safe than sorry. So
yeah, better safe than sorry. So this actually in 1961, it wasn't far-fetched that if you sent somebody up in space, that they would come back with superpowers because we didn't know, and the science back then was, you know, there's a lot of stuff we didn't know in 1961 scientifically that we know now. So some of this stuff just seems like really weird. But cosmic rays, that's the rays you get out in the cosmos. You know, there was another one of the people said it's a Martian about somebody, one of these superheroes. He called him a Martian. It's a Martian. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They called the thing a Martian. The cops did.
Yeah, well, that was another, you know, anything that was an alien was called a Martian. There's a TV show in the 1960s called My Favorite Martian. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was pretty funny. So yeah, we had a lot of science fiction at that time was, you know, that there were men on Mars and they lived on Mars and they were going to come visit us. And so.
And we were all let down. There was nobody. Or nobody that we found so far.
One of the things that struck me though, is that this town has a spaceport right outside of town where you can just go and jump in your rocket and go take off and go to space. And it's like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yep. Like, oh, there's just a rocket ready to launch, and we don't need any, you know, science or anything to launch this thing off the planet. But it's fine. Whatever. It's fine. Just hop in and go.
Yeah. We're just going to go hop in our rocket and then go around and come back. Yeah, right. That.
And so what you mentioned about like Hollywood looking for communists and stuff like that, Susan just calls it out right away. Like, we got to beat the commies.
We got to, yeah. And that was the way people talked back then, you know.
Yeah.
The commies were the boogeyman because it was during the space race and the Soviet Union was still in existence, and they had just put up the Iron Curtain, and the Berlin Wall went up in 1961.
And they mentioned the Iron Curtain too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, perfect segue into part 3.
Right.
Dr. Reed has a machine that measures shock waves or something vague. some kind of scientific something, that atomic plants, one behind the Iron Curtain, are being swallowed up into the ground. And atomic plants, are we talking about power plants or places where they make atomic material? Yeah. It's also vague. His machine senses another one happening right now in French Africa, which you'll have to explain French Africa to me, because I don't know. Where a monster okay, so this is a quote from the thing because it's important later on, once again, whose hide is powerful enough to dig its way up through countless tons of rock-hard earth. So this giant monster with claws pops out of the ground. The military at this atomic plant fires at them anyway, because obviously it's not going to work. And a commanding voice from down below calls it back below the surface. Reed pinpoints the location between all of these events, triangulates, and found Monster Island,